Hey guys! Welcome to today's video, where I've decided to add onto the pile of videos I've seen being recommended to me on my feed for the last few months and do an art and story things I don't like video. I'll be pairing this with a art and story things I do like video as soon as I finish that one, which may not come out until next month, but we'll see. But for now, we're going to be talking about the stuff I do like in art and stories. Learn about the way I can be annoyed by a piece of media, watch my slow descent into madness as I mourn what could have been. I will also be doing some comparisons and talk about pieces of media that have done the same thing as the thing I don't like, but in a better way. I don't want this to be a negative Nancy kind of video. I figure if I'm going to spend a whole video complaining about something, we could do a little learning by watching in the process. But first, the art for today's video. Last month it was my best friend Joe's birthday, and I made him an acrylic standee of his OC Frankie with Frankie's three-headed cat. A catburist, if you will. Frankie is one of two party members, my character Alkai being the other, and a Greek mythology City of Mist game that we're both in. Characters in the games get something called a mythos, and Frankie is Charon and Alkai is Chrysomalis, also known as the Flying Ram who becomes the Golden Fleece later. We had our first session this year, and I'm excited to see where the story goes. Now that that's out of the way, on to the video. We're going to start off with a soft one for this one, as I know a lot of people share this opinion, but I personally hate it when we are presented with a character who may have a slightly more fuller film form than someone like me, which, for reference, I'm very skinny. I'm specifically talking about people who are like a little not as skinny as I am. And then they call them fat. And I don't mean it as like a character calling themselves fat in a piece of media, because there's story about eating disorders, there's storylines involving self-image, and of course there's just people being assholes, and like, you know, like calling someone fat as an insult is stupid and mean. I am specifically talking about when we are seeing a character and the writer specifically wants us to see a very skinny character as fat. Have you ever seen those like how to draw manga books, and they'll like, these are like that one image of like, these are different body types you could do, and like all of them look exactly the same. They're like different versions of the same skinny girl. That's specifically what I'm talking about. Or like, you know, if you're gonna give us a character who have like a big chest and big hips but a very skinny waist, and both of the other characters and the writers in whatever media they're in insist that this character is supposed to be the fat one. And it's like really annoying to me, specifically because I have a lot of fat characters. Like my webcomic, my main protagonist is fat, and I want people to draw them correctly, and I do not want my character to look like somebody has drawn them in the style of One Piece, and how One Piece draws a lot of their female characters. I feel like maybe we don't need to be doing that, especially since fatphobia exists, and I just think it's really stupid. I think it's stupid that this is a thing we have to argue about. But anyway, I also do not like the current trend of movies undersaturating their films. And again, it's probably another universal opinion, but we're starting off soft. And it's not like every movie that's come out recently. Like, two of the movies I've seen last year were Sinners and Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, and they both color their movies gorgeously and know how to use saturation just to like make beautiful art. But then you have Wicked, which I'm just gonna talk specifically about part 1 because I have not seen part 2. I was spending a lot of the movie wondering where all the color went. You got like all these dingy gray hues in a story that's set in a magical land, and its original movie version is known to be this technicolor mess, and I say that lovingly. I see this in a lot of Marvel movies as well, and it's like some of these movies these days like feel like they're allergic to color. Same with like different TV shows. And if you don't want color in your movies, you could just make them black and white. I don't understand why we have to undersaturate everything to this dark dingy gray. And like, I feel like a lack of color can fit well in the story. Resident Evil Requiem, which I know the game just came out really recently, but I just finished playing it. That game has like all these like dingy hues that are very gray, but they fit the game and the tone that the game goes for when they use it, and they don't shy away from color when you can add color into a scene. Compared to Wicked, where when you get to the arrival of Shiz, and it's supposed to be this like beautiful grand academy where anything is possible, and it just feels like we're going to go see a terminal patient at a hospital. Now for my next one. I hate it when a story gives us a heel turn that has no support or build up to it, but the audience just have to accept that this character is evil now. My biggest example I can get for this one is Daenerys Targaryen from Game of Thrones. Dani is the daughter of someone who is called the Mad King, who was overthrown before Dani's birth. Her and her brother became orphaned when their mother died in childbirth, and later in the first season of the show, her brother is killed by her husband, who said brother forced her to marry. And this is the good backstory for a villain. But instead, Dani in the show becomes a savior, freeing slaves and overthrowing their cruel masters, but her goal through the story always remains the same. She wants to return to the Seven Kingdoms and take her rightful throne as the Queen of Westeros. Dani faces a lot of struggle through the show as she gets towards her goal, and a part of that is from her family's legacy. Her father was an evil man who brutalized people. The kingdoms have been ruled for centuries by her family, and this family also used to ride dragons in the middle of their conquesting them. There even is a saying about the Targaryen family where every time a new one is born, it's a coin flip to see if this child would do great things or terrible things. And this is propaganda that is constantly used against Dani all the time. Cersei uses it to turn the people of King's Landing against her, and other characters Dani meets through the show are incredibly distrustful of her at first because of her family's reputation. Dani has to constantly defend herself, learning to consider other characters' point of view and recognizing that yes, she may have never met her father, but his legacy is going to affect how other people see her, and she has to stand up and prove others wrong about what she believes in and what her true intentions are. And to be fair, also having 3 giant dragons does not help out in her case. And Dani has also been shown to be brutal through the show. She does terrible things to people, but she never does it to just random innocent bystanders who don't deserve it, and although her temper gets the best of her sometimes, she is always able to be reeled back in to reach her goals without going in a direction that be considered unforgivable. She says it herself in season 7, she doesn't want to be a queen of City of Ashes. Now, if she did end up becoming like her father, a more evil overlord, that wouldn't have been a bad thing when they start making her more brutal in season 8, but the problem with this direction is, again, all 7 of the previous seasons of Game of Thrones do not support this random change of character. If they started working at it earlier, having her clash with her various advisors during the siege at Meereen, and going against her advice, throwing her advisors to dragons, or even just burning Westeros villages down because they wouldn't support her in season 7 when she did finally reach the Seven Kingdoms, then the final massacre in King's Landing could have made sense. But instead, we are given 6 episodes where characters suddenly go, "Oh, Dani, she's actually bad. You don't want to do anything she says. She's gonna be an evil queen and do evil things." And expect us to believe that even though the evidence in the story so far says otherwise. This direction ends up feeling like a betrayal to Dani's character rather than a believable development that could have happened. However, this does not mean I don't think heel turns are bad, and if they are done well, they can be very, very good. So let me talk a little bit about Brother Faulkner from the podcast The Siltverses, my beloved show. I always recommend this to people. The plot of the Siltverses follows 2 followers of a forbidden river god, Sister Carpenter and Brother Faulkner, on their search for their god's signs upriver. While Sister Carpenter is from a family of longtime worshippers of their god the Trawler Man, she herself has been slowly losing faith. Brother Faulkner, who is a brand new convert when we first meet him, is on the surface a naive boy who is a religious fanatic. While both of these are true, there is more to his character under the surface. He is aware of his naivety and how that makes people see him, and although he recognizes those flaws as a shortcoming, he uses it to his advantage. He is a manipulative and proud person, and that pride leads to a lot of his downfalls in the show. A part of that is him believing that he is a prophet of the river, and that the Trawler Man has chosen him to carry his people to glory, and once they find the wither mark, he can present it to the other Catabazians, and he will be enshrined into the Siltverses as both a hero and a prophet. It becomes a pattern for Faulkner to have periods of time where he has this grandiose idea or fantasy, he responds to it, he fails, and then he tries again. Even when his faith begins to fade, he still plows forward in his plans to become his people's prophet simply because of one thing: pride. The things he accomplishes in the show lead him to reaching his goals, but he also ends up sacrificing a lot of himself and the people he loves in the process, directly or indirectly. Nonetheless, when he ends up turning the parish of Tide and Flesh against Sister Carpenter, blaming her for a pair of murders he himself committed, it is a believable turn because this is a pattern that is already established with his character. He turns a hotel clerk into a saint as one big FU to Marcel's Crossing, leading Hayward and tailing them to the wither mark at Bellwethers. Faulkner calling the police and telling them he was going to activate the Wither Mark again led to him and Carpenter being trapped by police at the end of season 1. And those are only just 2 examples from the first season of many, so when we finally get to that betrayal down the line, it is believable because we have most of 2 seasons of podcasts to back up Faulkner's actions. And not to go too into spoilers for the Silverses, because honestly, again, I think everybody should go listen to it. You should go listen to it. It's a very good show. But in the end, Faulkner's choices lead to many believable consequences, and so when he does this heel turn, it is believable because it supports his character. Now, this next one is a huge pet peeve of mine for a specific reason, and it's not just about the cultural appropriation, although that doesn't help much at all. I hate when there is a deer monster, specifically a deer skull monster, and people immediately assume it is a funny guy like the ones from Until Dawn. I hate this, because again, it is a cultural appropriation, and those don't like it. I don't like cultural appropriation, but I hate it because I love deer monsters, and I am tired of telling people that not every deer monster is a funny guy. Please, people, please! I love my deer skull monsters. I think deer are weird. They're fucked up little guys and they are perfect horror fodder. And I hate how in horror they are being reduced down to racist reasons. I hate it. I got my own body horror deer monster, and every time I make anything with them, I have to put a disclaimer that no, they are not a funny guy. They are a deer monster and they eat Taco Bell for dinner. It's a little too much to have to go, and every single drawing, clarify, this is not a funny guy. So stop calling it a funny guy, okay? Jeez, I am never putting this monster I made into the plot of Antlers. So please, horror movies, stop turning cultural appropriation into a horror movie, and stop especially throwing it into a deer monster. That's like the one thing. Ravenous is a movie with cultural appropriation. It has a funny guy in it, but I respect that movie more than something like Antlers because at the very least, their funny guy is not a deer monster. I am on my hands and knees begging you guys, please, please, please stop making your funny guys deer monsters and just stop making funny guys in general. Leave it alone. We can get more creative with our horror than this. And that being said, let's go on to another one that is a big writing pet peeve of mine. If you're going to make a comedy show, or a comedy podcast, or a comedy anything in general, and you want to include a serious storyline that you want the audience to take seriously, then please also take whatever you want the audience to take seriously and also be serious about it. And I don't specifically mean like the characters in the show not taking it seriously. Like, I'm gonna get into a little detail of exactly what I mean. The best example I can think of this for is Angel Dust from Has Been Hotel, and before you go, oh great, another Has Been Hater video, cause yeah, I know there's a lot of those out there. I am coming at this from a point of criticism, something about the writing that I find odd. I'm not a fan of Izzy Pop, and I don't hide the fact that I'm not a fan of Izzy Pop. I'm not talking about Has Been Hotel just so I can hate on it for a video. If I wanted to do that, I'd just make a whole video about Has Been Hotel. I can see why people like it, and so I'm coming at this from like a constructive piece of critique rather than as a way for me to trash on a show I particularly don't enjoy. But for those who somehow don't know what Has Been Hotel is, or at least who don't know who Angel Dust is, Angel Dust in Has Been Hotel is an adult star who works for another sinner in hell named Valentino, who is at Charlie's hotel specifically so she can redeem him as a sinner. I'm not going to go too much into stuff about the show because I don't know how much I can with Angel Dust's particular kind of work that YouTube will not shadow ban me for. But to make a long story short, Valentino abuses and assaults Angel Dust, and in the show we see how it impacts Angel. I personally don't think I could comment on how the assault part is portrayed, but to me it seems like the show's writers sometimes can't decide if they want us to take the Angel's trauma as a thing seriously, or to wave our hands at and laugh off. Do I think the writers want us to make fun of assault? No, of course not. The show does show us that what Angel Dust goes through is incredibly traumatic for him, but some of the decisions of how it feels like the writers want us to feel about his abuse kind of seems contradictory. The song Loser Baby is one, and yeah, it is a song that's like, we're both at rock bottom and we'll be at rock bottom together. Yippee, yeah, it's a catchy song, but it doesn't, I don't know, to me personally, it doesn't come off well when you're comparing the trauma of selling your soul because of a gambling addiction to someone who's being abused and assaulted by someone still on the go and can't really do anything about it. And both Husk and Angel Dust have their own problems and are in different but kind of similar circumstances, but pouring your heart out about the trauma your abuser causes you, and then having somebody that you're pouring your trauma out to sing a song about how you're both losers, tonally doesn't really feel that great to me. I don't know, it could just be me. And the show does want you to take Valentino as an antagonist figure seriously, considering he plays a bigger role in Season 2 than in Season 1, but it's hard to take seriously the writing of how much control Valentino has over Angel Dust, and how, like, awful it is that this is, like, a thing, and, like, make Valentino seem like a serious villain when they're pairing it with jokes about how much Valentino hits him. And again, I'm not saying the writing about these two characters' relationship is bad and that it's not a proper way to portray this kind of relationship. I am specifically saying that to me, it seems like the writers themselves can't decide if they want us to take what is happening seriously or if they just want to laugh about the circumstances. And yes, it could be a joke about how, oh hey, Valentino doesn't realize how much he actually hits Angel Dust. But if anything, that kind of proves my point, because it makes Angel Dust being assaulted the butt of a joke. But then they want us to take him being mind-controlled and used to work against Charlie seriously as well. The show isn't over, so maybe this could change later on, but as of now, with only 2 seasons of Hazbin Hotel out at the point of me recording this video, that's my opinion about it. And I have no problems with dark comedy, but you've got to still know when you want to make a joke about something and when you don't want the audience to see a plot point as a joke, especially if this is supposed to be a serious plot point. You can't have both and expect me to think that you, the writer, want me to take your character's situation seriously at all. But that is not to say that you can't have serious plot lines with jokes in them. There's a webcomic I started this year called Dumbing of Age. It's a slice-of-life comedy story about college students and a superhero, and yes, I do need to mention the superhero because she is important with what I'm about to talk about. There are a lot of examples I could choose from for this comic, as it is fantastically written and it covers a large range of topics such as mental health, gun control, school protests, and more, but I'm going to focus on one part of the story that is the closest to what I am trying to get at when talking about Angel Dust. So we're going to talk a moment about the character Joyce Brown. When we meet Joyce, she is the walking stereotype of a sheltered college conservative Christian girl. She was homeschooled, she's the youngest of 4 siblings, and she decided to go to Indiana University because that is how her parents met. Although she is studying to be an elementary school teacher, her real goal is to find herself a husband while at school, and in the beginning of the story, she gets herself into a bunch of wacky hijinks because of this. Joyce becomes the butt of a lot of jokes in Dumbing of Age, mostly due to her sheltered, naive nature, as well as aversiveness towards certain adult topics. She is my favorite character in the comic, although through most of the story she presents herself as the stereotypical good Christian girl. She is not perfect, and her development is very fun to read through. But a lot of stuff happens to get her there, and David Willis, the comic's author, knows how to make it funny until it's not funny. Near the beginning of the story, another character named Roz, who is the youngest sister of a congresswoman running for re-election, puts an adult tape of herself and the guy she slept with online as an act of rebellion against her sister's meddling in her life. Dorothy, Joyce's closest friend in college, was assigned to interview Roz about the video for the college's newspaper. Roz eventually agrees to the interview, but tells Dorothy that she has to do it at a party Roz will be at. Dorothy agrees to these terms, and Joyce ends up joining along with her, along with another girl named Billy. And at the party, the 3 split up. Joyce, who has never been to a party before, ends up running into the son of a pastor, who asks if she wants to go play board games in another room. Joyce agrees, thinking she has found herself a possible guy who is husband material. But this guy, let's say, is walking trash. We spent some time watching walking trash plans for Joyce get delayed, and interrupted through silly moments where Joyce has managed to bring a bunch of drunk people over to play board games with them, until he finally snaps and a fight breaks out between them. Joyce has been drugged at this point and is saved by her roommate Sarah, who arrives with the previously mentioned superhero Amazing-Girl. This event sticks with Joyce and influences a lot of how she acts through the rest of the story. Characters will comment on Joyce's newly formed agoraphobia, and how she won't walk alone on campus if she can help it. In one part of the story, when it's discovered Joyce was the one who drew a bunch of stuff on people's dorms, let's just say there are not appropriate images I could put on YouTube, she was confronted by Amazing-Girl about it, and Joyce ends up having a breakdown, bringing up the night of the party and how Amazing-Girl failed to find the guy who attacked her. And later when she sees the walking trash again, she decides to go public with what he did to her, encouraging other girls this guy had assaulted to come forward with their own testimonies. And when that guy decides to try retaliating against Joyce, that moment is not treated as a joke either. Coming of age, even after the assault at the party, doesn't shy away from making jokes about, again, Joyce's naive nature and how she is a sexual character and is embarrassed by it, specifically because of her religious upbringing, but it never makes her almost being assaulted a joke. It never goes, hey, isn't it funny how Joyce got drugged at a party, or how the guy followed her friends to her dorm so he could assault her there, or how funny it was that Joyce can't feel safe alone on campus because of walking trash, or how a bunch of his buddies kidnapped her and her friends later in the story. Isn't it so funny that Valentino doesn't notice how much he beats up Angel Dust? And with that out of the way, let's get on with a sillier pet peeve of mine. If you're going to make a monster character and try to convince me they are supposed to be scary and revolting, you cannot make them stereotypically sexy. You have to commit to the sexy or give me something that looks like it could have been made by Trevor Henderson. I am so tired of looking at monster stories and the monster is like, nobody can love me, I'm so hideous. And the monster looks like a supermodel with a chiseled abs or big badonkers and an ass to match. I want you to make your monster romance about an ugly, gross monster finding love, about something that looks like this, or to commit to your monster's hotness. It's okay if your monster is hot. Let your monster be hot. Let people recognize that your monster is hot, okay? Stop trying to make your story convince me that your stereotypically hot monster isn't. When I was at SCAD, I attended a talk by a comic artist whose characters were very scantily dressed, mostly the woman. Some of the men, they showed a lot of abs, but it was mostly the woman. And at one point in the talk, while he's showing us his art, the guy stops and goes, I know I draw a lot of skin, and I draw very little clothing, and most of my clothing is very tight, but I worked hard on my anatomy, and I just want to show it off. And I respect that guy more than someone who shows me a werewolf built like a female supermodel and tries to convince me that she is supposed to be the ugliest monster you've ever seen. Ugly monsters are fine. Make more ugly monsters. Your ugly monsters can't be hot. Stop trying to convince me your conventionally attractive ones are supposed to be ugly. And if you want to make a story about an ugly monster finding love, you gotta give me something that looks like a xenomorph. And another thing I hate is when a story adds a very unnecessary plot twist that just ends up ruining the vibes for the whole thing. I like a good plot twist, but not every story needs one for shock value. I read a book by Dean Koontz called Life Expectancy, and for somehow this book manages to be both a example of a plot twist well done and an example of a plot twist done horribly. So, if you don't know the plot of Life Expectancy, it follows the story of a man whose grandfather predicted that he would have 5 very bad days in his life, and the book focuses on those 5 horrible days. On the day of his birth, his father also met a clown whose wife was giving birth as well, and the clown ends up killing a nurse and kidnapping his own son when he found out his wife died in labor. Another nurse kept our main character safe, and that is when we get the prophecy about our protagonist's future. On the first bad day, the main character has a bad run-in with the son of the clown, and at the end of that day, the clown's son gets arrested. On another day, the clown tries to kidnap one of the main character's kids and ends up dying, but the good twist in this book is on a later bad day, when the main character finds out that he also actually is the son of that clown. That clown had twin sons. The protagonist's parents' original child was stillborn, and both of the nurses who had both of the boys that day hoped that with the angry clown just realizing his wife died, seeing his sons would calm him down. But before they could get any words in, the clown kills one of the nurses, snatches the boy, and runs off with him, leaving the brother behind. The nurse, who had the main character, ends up giving him to his parents instead, deciding that he would be better off raised by them than being given to his actual father, and the parents at that point didn't know that their actual child was stillborn. I feel like that's a good enough plot twist. A lot of these bad days end up being tied into this clown and his son, and their backstory, which we'll be getting a little bit into. So it adds on to that theme of those 5 horrible days, one of them being, hey, I found out my parents are not my parents and I am the son of a murderer. Then we get to the final horrible day, and that is when the main character finds out one more horrible thing that is so unnecessary to the story. That was, at this point, pretty good. I really enjoyed the story until this point. So I didn't mention earlier that the wife of the clown was an acrobat, and her father ran a circus that the clown and his wife ran away from. Her father hated clowns, and he wanted a legacy of good acrobats. The character is talked about a lot, but we don't actually meet the grandfather until this last day, which makes sense, because they're hyping this guy up. The clown character makes it a big deal that this guy's out to get him, and he finds out that one of his grandsons isn't in jail, so it's natural that this descriptively egotistical man would go after him too. Makes sense for a story. And that's what he does because he wants to kidnap the main protagonist's son to train him to be an acrobat because he wants to continue his legacy. This would have been fine on its own. This is on for the par. But Dean had to go and add one more plot twist to the story, and I don't want to linger on it, but let's just say it involved some incredibly unnecessary, unconsensual incest involving the main character's biological mother and the grandfather, and it does nothing to add to the story other than a cheap plot twist. I kid you not, they bring this up once and never again. He could have just not written it. It is literally the stupidest fucking plot twist you get added to a thing, and it literally sours the whole story for me because of it. And like, here's the thing, I don't mind dark, gruesome topics inserted in a story. I mentioned earlier, I enjoy Game of Thrones. I watched all 8 seasons of it. I just hate it when it's used for cheap twists and shock factor, and especially if it adds nothing to the story. In your last 20 pages of a book, you add this one mentioned twist and never again. I promise, a well-written, predictable story will be better received than one with a random plot twist just thrown into it. Which, speaking of twists, I hate it when a story loves to constantly kill off their characters, but specifically off screen, and then expects us to be really sad about it. As much as I love you, Malevolent, you do this all the time, and it got really infuriating by the time we got to the end of season 6. Like, the first couple times are just kind of like, oh, with a sad face. First time it's a character we meet, and it's like, also a sad face. But by the time we get to Yorick, a character we spent a season and a half with, killing him off screen, I didn't feel anything. And Yorick is one of my favorite characters in the show. Malevolent also does the same thing with the number of times it loves to kill off Arthur, to the point where I just kind of wanted him to stay dead by the end of this season. But that's not the point. And look, I don't hate killing off characters. I mean, again, I've watched Game of Thrones and they kill off so many characters. But if you're going to kill off a character and we can't see it, then you have to, one, not do it so much, and it's gotta have some kind of impact. And it feels like if you keep doing it constantly all the time, it's not, nobody's gonna feel anything about it because you use this as a crutch so much. And eventually when you want us to feel something about it, nobody's going to, because again, you've done it so much. Susan Collins' book series, The Underland Chronicles, does this too, but very well. And by the way, you should go read the series, it's one of my favorites. The Underland Chronicles follows Gregor, who falls down a vent in the laundry room of his apartment with his sister and finds himself as a prominent figure in a series of prophecies where he is called the Warrior. The Underland is filled with giant animals like rats and bats and mice and more, as well as a society of purple-eyed people that live there. The Underland ends up in a war by the last book, mainly between the rats and humans, with other creature societies picking sides. The last book, Code of Claw, involves a storyline about decoding war messages the rats send to each other, intercepting news in the enemy lines, and finding orders being given to soldiers. They end up breaking the code and finding out that there is a planned ambush to kill Sylvette, one of the war leaders and a strong warrior, while she is on her way to another settlement. Just as she has left for this meeting, they've discovered the code, they broke the code, and they discovered this message. Her husband Vicus wants to warn her, but everyone ultimately decides they can't because they can't risk the rats knowing that they figured out how to decipher their codes. In order to have an upper hand in the war, they needed to make a sacrifice. They wait. Sylvette is lost. Sylvette is not a good character, and in fact, she really sucks. She was an awful mother to her son, who also was a warrior, and she tried to cover up starting a pandemic while she had the cure on hand. But the moment where we find out that she's been killed in an ambush still hits hard. We see how it affects the characters, including Vicus, and how it still is a blow in the war effort, even though her actions oftentimes were unforgivable. The story doesn't go, well, she's gone, let's move on. We're given the consequences and reasons to care, despite Sylvette's flaws. And this isn't the only time that the Underland Chronicles kills a character off screen, but still, lets it stay as an emotional moment. In the second book of the series, Gregor meets a rat named Twitchtip. Twitchtip is known as a scent seer, and her senses of smell are so strong she can even smell color. Her and Gregor don't get along at first, but after Twitchtip saves Gregor's little sister Boots, and Gregor himself ends up saving Twitchtip, the two of them become very close friends and gain a very strong bond. We don't see Twitch-Tip again after the end of the second book, and Gregor spends a lot of the rest of the series thinking about her and her impact on his life in the short time that they've known each other. She is an important person to him despite that, and the relationship changes how he views different creatures in the underground, especially when it comes to the rats, who are at most easily the ones that are ready to fight with other humans. Cut of Claw gives us the key to solving messages on our own as the reader, and we get one of those moments in the book. Gregor and his friend Lexa are coding old codes when there's one that the book lets us decode ourselves. The Twitch-Tip died in the pit. The book doesn't tell us what the message says, letting the reader decode it themselves, but we immediately get Gregor's reaction to it and he is devastated. Whereas Malevolent tells us characters die, we need to move on from their deaths, the Underland Chronicles let us linger on what these hidden deaths mean. Solovet's was a necessary sacrifice in order to get a leg up in the war, but we still see the consequences of her loss and what it does to the people who were closest to her. Twitch-Tip is a character who we haven't seen a lot of in the story as a whole, but her brief time and the impact it had on Gregor is still felt despite the length of time since we've last seen her. And even after learning about it shortly after they sacrificed Solovet, it still is a strong impact onto both the Gregor and the reader. If you're going to kill off characters off screen, you're going to have to make it count, because if you kill someone off, especially a character we the audience spent time with, and expect us to just move on from it like it's nothing, then when you do try to make it a genuine emotional moment, all you're gonna really do is make me feel nothing. And speaking of killing off characters, but I hate it when a story kills off a character when they're about to start a character arc. I think it could be done under certain circumstances, such as denying a character who so desperately wants to start a redemption arc the chance to get one by killing them off. I feel like that can be satisfying, but there are times where it goes very wrong. The Walking Dead show does this with their character Sadiq, and it pissed me off so much that I wrote a storyline for a character in Harmony that was specifically in response to that. Sadiq witnesses the massacre of a bunch of survivors he knows, and this moment in the show traumatized him and lets us see how it affects him. But then, AMC decided to kill him off to reveal another character's heel turn right when they were setting up a character arc for Sadiq. The Walking Dead is allergic to letting us see people work through their trauma, and I am so about it! Do you know, how interesting it could be to see someone in a post-apocalyptic zombie wasteland work through things like, I don't know, post-traumatic stress disorder? Robert Kirkman, what are you doing? And the last one on this list is that I hate a comedic relief or gag character who either overstays their welcome or they're uninteresting and annoying. I'm not talking about the Sokkas of media, but rather a more specific kind of character. And I have to clarify, I talk about characters I hate a lot in my videos. Certain characters I mentioned in the past that I hate are Elias Bouchard, Press Secretary Carson, Willie Stampler, characters like those. But when I say, usually, 99% of the time, that I hate a character, I don't mean it in a I wish this character didn't exist kind of way. I enjoy what they bring into their stories, and I get invested in what they do next. When I say I hate a character, I usually mean that if they were a real person, I would not like them. I would not want to be associated with them, but I don't think they are bad characters. Ella from the podcast Chad, A Fallout 76 Story is the only exception to this. Ella in Chad, A Fallout 76 Story is a demon possessing a doll based off of a 1950s-esque raunchy humor, that kind of stuff. And for a dark comedy podcast, Ella fits right at home in it. She's violent, being carried around by another violent child she influences, and the two of them are best friends. Here is the thing about Ella that I cannot stand, is that she is incredibly not funny, and she is also around all the time, at least until she quote-unquote dies. Before her disappearance, she is in practically every scene with Susie, often with other main characters in the show, and will constantly insert violent or raunchy remarks that are very not funny, and usually none of the rest of the cast actually responds to her remarks. So all it does is it feels like that she is there to make really unfunny jokes just to break apart a scene and pull you away from the things that are happening, and it's very disorienting. I think the only time she's ever gotten a laugh out of me was from an episode they released that took place before her disappearance, and she makes a joke that she's been gone for so long she hopes that maybe she's funny again. But most of the time she's just there making unfunny comments that are super out of place for a majority of scenes. A character like her would work great as a gag character who only occasionally shows up, not as a character who's in the story a lot. A character who gets the same kind of reaction from me that Ella does, but doesn't overstay his welcome, would be Elevator Guy from the podcast Redacted. Redacted only has Elevator Guy show up twice, briefly in one episode, and in one mini episode that was just dedicated to him. And he's extremely cringe. His whole thing is getting into long, embarrassingly awkward arguments with his implied rich parents on the phone in the elevator, and the only person who sees him there is the main protagonist. The thing that makes Elevator Guy a more welcoming character than Ella, though, is that he is not in the show all the time. He could come up and be cringe and make me go, oh, not this fucking guy, like Jacob Kane does, but I also know I won't have to worry about him showing up to every episode of Redacted during an important plot event, and he won't interrupt the conversation to have a yelling match with mommy and daddy on the phone. This is also a character who is too much, but his time on the show is so brief that he can still remain funny without making me frustrated with his presence, like Ella. Shadow Milk Cookie from Cookie Run Kingdom I think too also follows this. Like Ella, he's in the game a lot, especially in the BC section of the Cookie Run Kingdom, and as of episode 15, probably the main antagonist of the series at the moment. And he is incredibly annoying and sometimes very unfunny. He is an antagonist who likes to terrorize the characters, crack jokes about mistakes from their past, and makes fun of their beliefs, and could just be very nasty when he wants to, even to the other beasts who are supposed to be his allies. But Shadow Milk isn't just, hey, let me make jokes to poke at your trauma. He has more motivations outside of that. He wants to be understood by someone, and yet recoils at pure vanilla Cookie's attempts to reach out with that understanding. He has issues from his past as the fountain of knowledge, and he still hasn't gotten over them yet, and it shapes the way he presents himself and how he acts with other characters in the game. He doesn't crack jokes when things get serious, and when he is in hot water, that aloof attitude disappears. And my point with him is, if you're going to have a major character also play the role of comedic relief, they have to be more than just the comedic relief. Otherwise, they overstay their welcome. And that does it for this video. I don't really know how to wrap this one up because this is probably one of the more negative videos I've done for this channel, but I hope by pairing the things that I dislike with art and stories and putting them with examples of things that have done it better, I hope that maybe I could provide an insight into why I dislike them and how they could be improved. Especially if you were thinking of doing the same thing and are now suddenly doubting yourself if you should do it at all. Does anyone else have that kind of anxiety when someone critiques things you were thinking of doing, or is it just me? Just make things you like and don't let anyone else bring you down. If you haven't yet, consider liking and subscribing. I will be coming out with a video for art and story things I do like, so if you want to see what I do enjoy, then stick around. I also do other videos such as podcast recommendations, story times, animations, and more. And if you are subscribed and want to support me, consider becoming a patron. You can get things such as early access to InHarmony pages, concept art for future projects, and even our newest reward for every $2 and up member, your name at the end of this video. Consider checking it out. Your support means the world to me. And speaking of InHarmony, that's my webcomic. If you want to read it, you can find it at inharmony.the-comic.org. We are getting to some interesting things in the current chapter. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!